welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. This is a show hosted by patrons featuring patron content recorded live on the Invictus Discord as Malevolent is in its 5th season. This show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a recent update, so if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released to chapter 233 or part 47, check out now and come back next time. Our episodes are recorded, so you can always listen later. I'm Queen, my pronouns are she, her, and tonight I control Arthur's eyelashes. I think maybe just the left set of them, though.
My name is PinchofPeppers. I go by Peppers. My pronouns are she, her. And today I'm controlling that one bone in your ear. I'm controlling that thing.
I love how you went and looked up the exact name for that.
No one knows. You think some nursing students are listening to this and they're like, Peppers didn't list the tracheodoris. Yeah, you joking me? Everyone knows that there's a bone in your ear, so I'll just say that.
I don't know.
Oh, you know what, Queen? You didn't say the scientific term of eyelash. It is actually the Bora Bora Noosis,
First of all, I would not actually put it past some of our listeners to know some niche knowledge like that, because a lot of them have special interests related to medical fields, weirdly enough. But second of all, at least I knew that the colloquial term was eyelash, and I didn't just say ear bone, which isn't, nobody calls it that.
Oh, yeah, because those are quantifiable things. Those are the exact same in terms of skill knowledge of knowing, earlash. Eyelash. Earlash, right? We're doing a combo. Everyone knows what the fucking eyelash is. If I'm gonna be like, actually, I'm in control of the Enos cranium, which is what's in your ear. It's that one bone. No one knows. So I'm just gonna say bone in your ear.
Okay, sweetie. I mean, I just want to point out that all of them have access to Google and can get that information at any time, which is something you also could do.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking in layman's terms so they don't have to Google it, because this is just an experience to kind of sit down and relax after a nice day after work when their brain is fried after a long 9 to 5. You know what? Yeah.
Oh.
You're against workers. That's what I think. You're against workers. The hard-working people.
Okay, Peppers, do you want to give us the summary?
Okay, so part 233. Arthur hides in the fog and away from the road. Yorick commands Arthur to create the Hand of Malevolence, and as he demands it more, his voice becomes more warped to sound like the Vanguard's original voice from Season 1. Arthur follows Yorick's instructions, creating the Hand of Malevolence by closing the hag's hand around the hanged man's eye, and then putting the black candle, which he calls the Raven's Candle, in the palm of the hand to cloud the eye. When Arthur finally lights the candle, everything goes quiet. They are encased in silence. Yorick offers the Hand of Malevolence to them to use freely, explaining that this object suppresses any and all magical effects from those around it and also offers a small radiance of silence. He heavily implies that the creature in the mist that is following them is Lilith, or rather Alexander, the owl which has been watching them since the beginning, as she has the ability to change her appearance at will. Yorick warns them of Lilith's power and how she should not be trusted, but she seems to be opposing Cain. The candle begins to wane, and they need to decide if they will reveal the information they've just learned, or if they should attempt to deceive her.
So, what did you think about that chapter?
I was not shocked that Alexander was Lilith. because I'm pretty sure it was Fish that's been a strong influence, just saying, yeah, that's Lilith. That's Lilith. I think we've had quite a few fans who've like known from the beginning that Alexander's Lilith, because there's some heavy implication that owls are part of what Lilith is. I'm not very familiar with the Call of Cthulhu lore, but apparently that's that. It felt very tabletop RPG when Yorick explained the Hand of Malevolence. I was like, oh yeah, we're all sitting down at a D&D table, and the DM is just pulling out his card of the Hand of Malevolence that gives like all the stats. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got some fun lore in there. How about you?
Yeah, I really liked the intensity of this episode, like the urgency that whole first part started with getting into the, falling into the ditch, and the way that they were arguing about the act of actually building this hand and whether or not Arthur should even do it, and John's like resistance. I really appreciate that John has consistently been against anything to do with the Vanguard this whole time. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to have always been this way. I think it makes sense for him to be wary of anything that comes from the dark world. We know that John has like a very deep, I don't want to say fear, but like, because it's beyond that, but he has a very deep understanding of like the the bad shit that comes from the dark world, and we have good reason to believe him when he says that doing things in service of anybody that has anything to do with the dark world is a bad idea. So it really helped intensify the experience for me, realizing that Arthur was almost being forced to do this and not really being sure of what other choice they had. I mean, it was a big leap of faith, and at the same time, I don't see it that I would have done anything differently in that situation. Like, obviously there's a reason for Yorick telling us to do this, and the fact that it was to help us in the end, I think that was actually surprising to a lot of people. Maybe not surprising like they thought he would do the opposite, but maybe more like they weren't sure if Yorick would lift to help. He even admits, I think, that he kind of went against orders maybe to help us out here. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it kind of struck me that he was going against essentially like his nature. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I actually initially wrote that into the summary, and then I'm like, oh, no, this thing's too damn long. So I had to remove some stuff. I will read a couple things from chat that people have corrected me on. First of all, Lilith, I was not aware Lilith is a real world folklore character, and that apparently owls are connected to Lilith in folklore, so that's kind of cool. So she's not just a character in Call of Cthulhu, but Call of Cthulhu does reference the folklore Lilith. But Fish clarifies that owls aren't straight up mentioned in Call of Cthulhu, I believe.
I feel like personally I had never heard the name Lilith outside of like, well, I've heard the name Lilith before, but I mean as far as referencing a significant kind of character in a story, I'd never heard the name Lilith outside of religion for me. Some refer to Adam's wife as Lilith, Adam as in like Adam of creation. In Catholic lore, I guess you could say technically.
Oh my gosh, I
um,
forgot about that.
Yeah, and so when everybody started bringing up Lilith the first time quite a while ago, I was like Lilith of the Bible? No, very different Lilith.
From the Bible?
So yeah, I mean, I guess there is some overlap between like Bible Lilith and this Lilith, but I wouldn't say it's a direct one to one. I mean, as far as I understand it, but what do I know? We really should have like had somebody write something for this episode. Neither one of us know very much about the lore.
Hey man, we're just bringing once again. We are the initial experience to lure people in, And then people who are actually listening to this, who are getting like progressively pissed off because we don't know that much, this just encourages them to go and check it out.
Yeah, go and check it out, or like write to us or come talk to us, yell at us in real time. Or we even, by the way, for anybody who's listening live, we do have a link pinned in the chat here where you can submit voice messages and I will play them live, like while we're recording, and talk about them, and we'll have like a little conversation.
I feel like, okay.
You feel like that maybe wouldn't be a good idea,
I feel like
Peppers?
we should vet those. Cause
We will
listen,
be.
yeah.
I will be. Let me clarify
I
that.
definitely shouldn't be vetted. Queen has personally vetted me multiple times.
All right, Fish posted some good stuff for us to read out here, so I'm going to read it. He says this is from her Call of Cthulhu entry. In Call of Cthulhu lore, Lilith is essentially another guise worn by the entity behind her that she uses to gain influence and power over humanity. So it says, while scholars argue about Lilith's origin prior to its arrival on this planet, the human record shows the first mention of a Lilith in Sumerian myth within the epic Gilgamesh and the Hupulu tree. I'm doing my best. A poem found on a tablet at Ur, which is a UR, and believed to date back to 2000 BCE. Other mentions have been uncovered among Babylonian demonology, with incantations found to ward against Lilith, who was thought to prey upon women and children. Subsequently, Lilith's name has appeared in Egyptian and Greek works, as well as those of Hittites. I'm going to let you decide how that's pronounced, and Israelites. The Bible mentions Lilith as wilderness demon shunned by the prophet Isaiah. It is said that the rare Psalm of Sorrow, date and author unknown, discusses Lilith in great length.
Our chat has informed us that it's pronounced Hittites.
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 Great, I said it. Yay. Thank you to Edie and Fish. Yeah, so I mean, that was very interesting and cool to learn about. I also enjoyed how rushed the ending of this chapter felt. It very much felt like a return to form as far as like having to make a quick decision and realizing that it is very like, it's very different when you experience this as a full hour-long part rather than a chapter, because for the public it is a really fast decision made like immediately, but for us it's like a whole week between when we make that decision and when we hear the chapter and all that stuff. So it's very interesting, but I really enjoyed the pacing of this one.
Yeah, it feels, I'm sure every single time that Harlan like completes it and blends it together, it feels very seamless. So I really like that.
Yeah. The other thing that I enjoyed, I'm looking at the transcript here. So I know that for a long time people were really banking on the fact that they were building a Hand of Glory, which is another artifact that I guess is really famous that I don't know anything about. We're really well prepared for this episode, Peppers. Yorick says, I did nothing, you lit the Hand of Malevolence, an extremely rare and powerful artifact which I give to you. And that moment was shocking for me, not necessarily because I was expecting a Hand of Glory, because frankly, the minute that everyone was convinced that it was a Hand of Glory, I knew that that's not what it wouldn't be. Not because I knew what it was, but because if there's anything I've learned about Malevolent, it's that it has this almost obstinance in that the minute you think you know what it's going to do something else. And it's almost deliberate. Like it's not supposed to be expected. So I was shocked actually by the fact that Yorick was saying like, this is something that I built and I'm giving it to you. And I'm not supposed to, and I wasn't gonna, but I'm kind of going about protocol. I'm going above protocol here, and I'm doing this for you. And I thought that was a very cool twist to invent. I also appreciated that they got a little bubble of silence. That's always something I wish that everybody had the benefit of in like horror movies and horror media, that little like bubble where they can just talk about shit and they don't have to pantomime at each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Graham says Yorick calls it the opposite of a Hand of Glory. Yeah. Graham also adds that Malevolent is great at like every time whatever actually happens is 10 times better than all the predictions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something great as well. Is I think it's very difficult for writers to hear people predict their stories, and the gut reaction is to, kind of stray. But I see a lot of inexperienced writers, they'll do that, and then it'll result in something worse or something that doesn't make sense
Right.
because it was like ham-fisted in last minute because they didn't want their audience to predict what would happen. I feel like Malevolent manages to avoid that in most cases. I think almost in all. I can't really think of one at the top of my head that, failed that. Where it was very like, yeah, you guys didn't predict this. Maybe you were close on the money, but it still wasn't it. Or you're completely, off, completely off. Like, for example, when John manifested, what I expected, honestly, was kind of this climax of all of these different emotions. And I thought this was going to be this grand expression of love from John trying to enact vengeance on his friend, and that didn't occur. And that was a great moment where it kind of subverted, I think, a general expectation that some people have when like watching movies, where that's not what the story's trying to tell. And then it can be, like smaller things like the hand of malevolence.
Right. Yeah. And Himi, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, says something that I think is important to touch on too. Fans predicting something should feel rewarding, in my opinion. And yeah, I agree. I think that there are some instances of people predicting things and turning out correct, and it has proven to be it's been a very good feeling. As they've reported, I have barely ever managed to feel that way. I don't usually make accurate predictions. I'm okay with that. I'm not bothered by it. But I will say that, like, the one or two times that I've been right about a vote have felt very, very gratifying. That's a very fun time. And I do think that it's hard because you want to balance the idea that your listeners have something to look forward to and they can always be kept guessing, but at the same time you want them to feel like they do understand where you're going. So you want to see a mix, right, of like people being able to accurately predict what's going to happen and people being blindsided by the twists and turns that you want to throw at them. And I think that can be a really difficult thing. I think Malevolent isn't always necessarily as balanced as it could be in that regard. I think there is sometimes a skewing of not knowing what's going on, but I also think that's the nature of an unfinished story. I mean, that's something that the tracks are being laid as we make as we go. They're not always laid out that far in advance. And it's funny, I was just talking about this with you, Peppers, before we started recording. There's this uniqueness about the way Malevolent was started and the way it's made to this day that I've touched on a couple of times in previous episodes, of the fact that it started out as a basically an audio tabletop role play game where there were mechanics. That's why you hear the dice in season one, and there are all kinds of sound effects that got left in that were the result of actually just trying to play this like a game with mechanics and stats and an inventory and all that stuff. And that is a very, very different place than where we're at now, even though the format really hasn't changed. And to accommodate for all of that, there has to be some changes. There has to be some like changes in the way that the story is written and also in the way that its audience engages with it. And I think sometimes it can feel, I don't want to say confusing, but it can feel overwhelming because there's so many threads that have not been finished. But that's very true to a lot of very popular mysteries. Not every story gets an ending at all. That we're following this one character, and he's not going to be able to stay through the whole life of, I don't know, Marie, to see like what happens to her and how she deals with her sister, and if that poor woman can go back to normal ever again. We don't get those answers, right? And I think that is just kind of expected at this point. I will say I often don't engage with the lore, not just because it's not my cup of tea to always be that deep into stuff, but also because I feel like any good story is gonna let people understand it without having to look at any external source, whether that's friends or Google or a book of like source material or anything else. I feel like a good story, you can pick it up without knowing anything about it and read it, and it can still be not only understandable but enjoyable. And for me, I really feel like Malevolent hits that mark. It's enjoyable. I understand it. I'm excited to see what happened next, and I don't need to know anything outside of what the story is telling me. And that's just the way I choose to engage with it. But I do think that it adds something when you're trying to figure out more beyond what the story is telling you. And I think it can also add to the amount of back and forth if you're talking about lore as far as like the implications of gods go versus knowing a lot about the century that we've just dropped into, or knowing a lot about the game that the story was based on. It's just you end up having a different set of experiences depending on where your source came from. But I think we can all agree, like, it's still a really good story even if you don't know anything about anything of where it came from. And stuff doesn't really bother me.
Yeah. I think it also comes down to people get different things from different media that they consume. Some people want certain things that maybe that media won't provide. Maybe they're used to certain things that, for example, I don't like to compare horror podcasts, but I will, for this example, do so. TMA, the Magnus Archives, and Malevolent are two very different. Despite the fact that they're in the same genre, they're two very different stories. For one, Malevolent is made with audience interaction, and it is made on a weekly basis. It's also made by one person. It has different goals in mind. It has different themes in mind. It has different things that it's trying to translate to the viewer, whether that be regarding, I don't know, toxic masculinity or friendship or hope horror or, so on and so forth. Versus the Magnus Archives feels, I mean, it was fully written before it really started. Like, it already had these established plot lines. The audience doesn't really have any ability to impact that. It's not as flexible in that regard. It's not as malleable. That's the word I want to use, because it's they're doing two very different things. And so, when it comes to things like that, I think Malevolent has strengths in that malleability. I also think people can get different things from Malevolent. Me, like, for example, Queen and I, we're not super into the eldritch lore. That's just not our thing. But we have great people like Fish, like Graham, like Liz, who are really deep in either Call of Cthulhu lore or just general eldritch lore or so on and so forth. So much lore. They love that kind of stuff. And that's awesome to see them really delve into it. And so when these name drops are dropped, Nyarlathotep, I'm so shocked I said that on the first try.
You did really good. That was
I was
excellent.
like, whoa. I got so shocked that I said that I can't remember anybody else. Lilith, the Mother of Darkness, and, what she might represent. All these different eldritch characters that me, for example, I just don't know that much about. I see these people get so excited when those names are dropped. And I think that's so cool, and I can live vicariously through them. I could watch their excitement and really enjoy seeing their excitement versus, I mean, even Queen and I are different when it comes to Queen loves the interactive part of Malevolent. Queen loves being a part of the mines, the pole mines. I mean, she does not. She does not yearn for the mines, but the pole mines. That was I tried really hard to make that a joke. It just didn't go through.
I love you. It's great. No, it's wonderful. You did so good. I also do. I do, in fact, actually play Minecraft. So I
Oh,
do
okay. So you do yearn
love
for the
all kinds
mines.
of mines. Yes.
Speaking of that, what do you think of the new Minecraft update? Anyway, so versus the way that I consume Malevolent tends to be more, I treat it as its final piece as it's published. Each episode, I kind of consume it that way because that's how I started and that's how I'm used to consuming most podcasts. And I like that. I enjoy the narrative aspect. The number one thing, the reason why I love Malevolent maybe over the majority of any other podcast that I've listened to is the fact that it's so character focused and so kind of emotion based that it feels very personal, and it really delves into the tropes that I just eat up. I don't really want to be lore dumped. I want to listen to the characters get sad and get happy and, have all these moments.
No, you don't, you fucking liar.
Yeah, I just want them to be sad and to die, and then I could be like, ha ha ha, they died.
And then when Arthur actually dies, you have a
Yeah,
fucking
yeah, and then
breakdown.
when Arthur dies, I'm like, I'm gonna fucking throw up. Yeah, but like we all enjoy different things. So I what I find the beauty in Malevolent is it's definitely its own niche because not only is it a weekly podcast, episodic, it can result in maybe some information falling through or becoming inconsistent. Like the frequent joke made in Benevolent was Arthur being able to play the piano in spite the fact that John is able to play, or John has one of the hands. As somebody who listens to this, I kind of don't give a fuck. It's kind of like whatever serves the story. This is something that I learned a little later on in life when I was maybe a bit more focused on information, being kind of the lore master. I used to be a lore master when it came to Shocker armor. And so when I'd watch certain shows and like they weren't wearing helmets, I'd be like, what the fuck? They would die immediately because they don't have any fucking helmets. This is ridiculous. Forgetting that would kind of lose the majority of the actor's emotion and so on and so forth. So you lose something when you do something like that. So whatever serves the story. This is a very long-winded way to just say I really love to see when Malevolent focuses on the characters and everything else is secondary to me versus other people absolutely dig the lore. And so I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, I don't care about the lore, therefore nobody else should care about the lore. And I'm also not implying that I am I'm like, I don't fucking care about the lore. Never mentioned it. It's more of, hey, that's not my personal flavor, but I love the fact that there is this massive audience that love the lore and love to kind of create the lore of Malevolent.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're both so adamant about repeating over and over again that we're not lore people because we don't ever want people who listen to this to think that we are intentionally leaving out stuff about lore or that we don't care or we don't know it's there. I definitely know it's there. It's everywhere. It's just that Peppers and I, that's not what we're into. And so when we do bring people on, we try to make sure that if they are into that lore, they get to talk about it because this would be a great platform for that. So I think we're on the same wavelength about that. I also want to mention that in general, I am opposite of Peppers, where I started listening in the same way that Peppers did, where I was just a public listener and I got completely caught up before I even looked at the Patreon or Googled it or anything. I like am really, when I'm getting into media and I know that I have a long way to go before I catch up, I am really intentional about avoiding anything to do with it. It helped that nobody in my immediate circles was into horror at all. So for me, I was completely isolated from anything that would have influenced my experience. And I really just listened to it as a public listener, pretty much by myself. And I did not have any engagement with fans. I didn't live blog to the public or anything like that. So very isolated experience, and I caught up with it completely, and then I joined the Patreon, and then I started listening chapter by chapter, and that is actually my preferred way of listening now, chapter by chapter. I actually don't often go back and listen to the full part. I have the one of the problems with my brain is that anytime it sees that I've already listened to something, it'll go, I don't need to listen to that again. It's not new anymore. I know what happens. Now, That's not fucking true because I have the memory of a piece of dryer lint and I don't remember shit. So, like, I should be re listening to things. But I don't often rewatch the same stuff. I don't, in my life, I have a really hard time repeating things because it's just really hard for me to convince myself that I will enjoy it again. I know that sounds crazy, but that's just the way I am. And so I don't re listen to the whole part unless I'm streaming it for somebody or unless I am like hanging out with somebody else and they want to listen to it. I'm happy to re listen if somebody else is present and we chat through it or whatever. Because for me, a lot of my enjoyment from things comes from interacting with people and not just purely enjoying the thing by myself. These chapter segments being much shorter and always new and novel for my brain is a very fun way for me to engage with it. And it also keeps me from even noticing the inconsistencies that people seem to notice. Like, there are inconsistencies in Malevolent, and everyone's aware of them, including Harlan, and they don't bother me, mostly because I don't remember them. They're not important. Like, I guess it doesn't break my immersion because I'm not listening to the whole series straight through. But even when I did, I didn't really notice them either because I was so wrapped up in what was going on and not, wait, shouldn't John have been able to do that because he had the hand? You know what I mean? Like, that's just not where my focus is at the time. And I'm not saying that you're bad or wrong for noticing them or being bothered by them or having your immersion broken for them. It's just a personal thing. But I do think that if you're bothered by that stuff and it can really take you out of the moment, you could try just listening to the chapters and then maybe waiting a little bit longer between listening to the parts. I don't know. I find that I much prefer Malevolent as a chapter by chapter story that I engage with in my own way versus constantly re-listening to the same things over and over again, where I'm going to start memorizing things, I'm going to start noticing things, and that's just a different experience. There are things I do that with. I had a favorite movie that I went to see in theaters 32 times exactly, and I can recite lines to this day.
Well,
So,
now you
like,
have to share what that is.
no, I'm not doing that because people will kill me. I will be labeled not only
Ooh, it has to be something controversial.
I will be labeled
Harry Potter.
not only a millennial but also a shill. I will be labeled terrible
I think it's
things.
Harry Potter or maybe
It is not
Cats.
Harry Potter.
Nice.
It's not been canceled. How about this? It is not a cancelable thing.
Is it
Well,
a
I mean
Disney
anything is
movie?
cancelable. It is a Disney movie. That's
Okay,
all I will
yeah.
say.
Inside
So,
Out.
anyway, the vote. We're going to move on to the vote. Chapter 233. I I got a full-time job and I'm starting to realize I can't keep up with my pull graphics anymore and it's kind of breaking my heart. I don't have the stamina anymore. I don't have the memory to keep going back and checking. So I still have not gotten to make a graphic for this one. However, I still plan to. I still plan to tomorrow or maybe tonight. But the vote is reveal versus deceive, and reveal is at 46% and deceive was at 54%. That was back when I screen capped this earlier. It's 265 votes. We have roughly 310, I think, right now, 305, something like that. So we still have quite a few voters left to cast their vote. I know a lot of people wait till the last day and a lot of people forget, but usually we hit around the 300-ish mark more often than not. And Marvin withholds, I have a feeling Marvin withholds his vote till like the last minute. So we're always like one short. But yeah, so Peppers, oh, I guess this reveals what I voted for. But Peppers, what were you on? What team were you on?
So I was actually at Deceive. I am not very gung ho about it. I think I am going by. I thought logically it made more sense that we keep the one thing we have, the one thing we have, a secret. We do not have to use what we have in our hand like immediately. I'm essentially treating this like a poker game. And why would we show our hand to Lilith immediately after it's revealed that we know it's Lilith? However, I can also understand that people are saying it's a really fucking bad idea to try to deceive Lilith, who is a very smart girly who watched us make the Hand of Malevolence, and she probably knows what it is.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I Okay, so that did anyone hear that just now?
Yeah, I heard your dog flapping his little,
You knew exactly what it was.
yeah,
I love that
his
you knew
little
what it
ears.
was.
Because I had dogs too, and they always flop their little ears around.
She shakes her head really hard and her giant chihuahua ears hit her own face.
Yep.
It sounds really painful,
It's
to be
it's
honest.
always Chihuahuas. Their little skinny little floppy ears.
She has like satellite dish ears. She's such a little weirdo. Her name is, for anyone who doesn't know, her name is Joy. She's the light of my life, and I would do anything
More
for
like a
her.
joy of your life.
This is a very silly picture of her, but it gives a good picture of her giant ears.
Big old
She was
ears.
eating a bone.
Oh, yeah. Those look like very floppy ears.
Yeah, they're stuck straight up. They don't move. So when she hits her face with her ears, it's very loud, and my mic always picks it up. Anyway, what was I even saying? Oh, I was just gonna say I I can't tell you why it feels so bad to deceive. And I am not a person who votes on their gut. I hate it when people are like, "Oh, I'm just voting based on vibes." I hate that. If you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know how I feel about no arguments. I'm just voting with my vibes. It's fine. You're allowed to do that. I just don't want to hear about it because that's not arguable. Anyway, I have to tell you, I don't understand why
And yet, how the tables have
yeah,
turned.
I cannot tell you why I feel like deceive is a terrible option, but it feels bad. At the same time, so does reveal. Like, neither option feels good, but there is this strong, like, it's almost a bodily feeling I have in my chest that just says, that's a bad idea. Don't lie. Don't lie. I wonder if it's just maybe because I don't like lying, but I don't think so because I would have voted. Oh, no, I don't know. See, I'm just so torn. I'm torn because I'm not, I don't think either way, I don't think we're going to get in trouble. Like, I don't think it's going to come down to a smackdown. I just don't think it's very likely that John and Arthur can keep that up for that long, especially if they're going to keep pretending that she's like if they just act like they don't know anything. I don't know. It just feels like they're going to fuck that up. And even though they may not get in trouble for it, I still feel like it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I think just overall, I mean, I get now being on the other side of it. You can't really argue with vibes.
Yeah, see, the
Yeah,
turntables.
but I mean, yeah, it's true. I Your vibe is that, it's overall probably a worse decision to deceive versus I'm the opposite. I think it's a worse decision. I don't necessarily think that that they would get like attacked or anything like that. But I do think I would prefer to keep her guessing. First, I will say what Fish wrote in the chat because I do have a response to what Fish has to say. So Fish says, I am trying to think from Lilith's perspective here, which may be a mistake and only lead to a misinterpretation, but it's just the way that my brain is going about this. If I knew that the hand was made and Arthur had a moment alone with Yorick to speak in a space where I couldn't overhear, I think I would assume that my jig was up, and at the very least, Arthur knows the owl following him isn't an owl. Possibly even my true identity, because Yorick is a vanguard and would know these sorts of things, and has probably known for a while, but has not had a way to inform Arthur until now. So, would I believe it if Arthur continued to act as if nothing was wrong, with a total lack of suspicion towards my owl disguise? After having that time to speak in private with the Vanguard? No, the fuck I wouldn't. But I don't know if it'd still be better to try. So, my response is I agree, but I would prefer to keep Lilith guessing rather than give her a concrete answer. As long as she's on her toes in some way, I don't want Lilith to feel comfortable right now. So I want to keep her guessing because I don't know what Lilith wants from them. I feel like Lilith might essentially be using Arthur as a tool to get back at her dad, or, she knows her dad's plan. I don't necessarily know what she wants to do with Arthur and John. I would prefer to keep them in the dark. Keep her in the dark regardless of how little doubt that she has. I still want to give her some doubt. But Fish brings up a good point that she was actively preventing them, trying to prevent them from using or from creating the eye. They got the eye, they ran. I mean, it's pretty obvious. So why waste the breath? That could potentially antagonize her. There's multiple different, I think, dangers to this. But me personally, I think that my opinion is also very malleable in this sense, because I also understand what Fish and what other people are saying when they come to the conclusion of voting to just reveal it, to just get it out the way. Me personally, however, I would prefer to keep her in the dark as much as I could. However, another thing, Arthur has not had the best track record with deceiving people. He's been, quite honestly, a little shit at it. So I don't know if that would be the most brilliant idea if that was the case.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, Fish, like you said, Fish makes a point, like, and that's really where my head was going to, trying to think from Lilith's perspective. It's really obvious that her jig is up. Like, I don't think she is gonna fall for any deception, even if we successfully do it. I just don't think, I think it's obvious that Yorick knows who she is and just went and told them, because how the fuck would Arthur know what he's doing otherwise, right? I also think that she's going to continue to try and impede them. And I don't know if it's, the problem is, I don't know if it's important to her to be undercover. Like, how important is her guise right now? And is it up to her? Like, she's not at her full power. We already know that. Maybe she's stuck like this for a hot minute. At the same time, nothing we know of right now can be totally sure. Like, how much of this is optional? How much of this is her choice? Or like, how much how much can she do stuck in this form? And then on top of that, do we have the ability to even speak with her? Because really, she could play owl. She could like continue to pretend that she doesn't know what the fuck we're talking about, or she could just be stuck as an owl and be unable to respond in any way. I don't know. I think she I think that either option isn't going to significantly change how she reacts. I also don't think either option is going to punish us severely. I think it is literally just a choice that will affect how the boys deal with it going forward. I also think that it's interesting that Yorick has been so unclear about his own motives and very cagey about pretty much everything. I still do believe it is largely because Yorick doesn't know as much as as we think he does. I think maybe he really genuinely is still in the dark about a lot of things. But it's also possible that Yorick isn't speaking freely because he knows that they're being followed and watched in this way, and he can't really explain himself for the same reason. It's interesting that he still refused to speak, even though supposedly the owl had, well, didn't he say like the owl had flown away at the end of the, what, like after it got the
Mm-hmm.
eyeball?
They quote scared it away.
Yeah, so like Yorick is still speaking cagey, even though they're actually running away from the scene. The owl's nowhere to be seen. So, like, he's aware that she has some kind of magical radius or ability that could affect his ability to speak freely, or the fact that they can be eavesdropped on even if they don't see it, or her, whatever. I don't know. I think it's just a very sticky situation, and I guess I primarily feel like reveal is the better answer here, because I don't I just don't feel like we have the I don't know what deceiving her would do for us that reveal would mitigate. You know what I mean? Like,
I want to lessen the power that she feels that she has over us. I think Tiny Rebecca made a good mention. Oh gosh, let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, Tiny Rebecca says Lilith being forced to make the next move explicitly shifts the power over the situation away from her. And I think that is the core of my decision to deceive. Is I'm trying to move as much power away from her, and so any knowledge that we have against her can be used, yeah, can be used against her. And I just think that if we reveal, we just like throw the cards in the air and just be like, the jig is up, Lilith. Okay, pop out. Whereas I don't necessarily think that we can, I think that she can definitely infer on her own. But like I mentioned, I would prefer to keep her on her toes as much as feasibly possible, because I do not think that she's actively hostile towards Arthur, even if Lilith learned later on that Arthur lied to her and that he knew that she was Lilith from the very beginning.
I get what you're saying, and I think that what Tiny Rebecca said was almost enough to push me over, but then I have to think, like, is that shifting the power away from her? Because I don't see it as power at all. Like, I don't, just because we reveal what we know doesn't mean we have, I don't think it's a measure of power, I guess. Like, I don't think us knowing what she is and just not telling her is a sign of power, because I think she doesn't care if we know who she is or not. I think she's,
I think she does, because why else would she be hiding her true self unless she was trying to, hide herself in that way, because she would perhaps know that Arthur would be reluctant to talk with her right out the gate. I personally don't really subscribe to the concept that she's trapped in that owl form. There's really nothing to suggest in the lore that, she has been trapped as an owl. I do think that this is an intentional transformation on her part, and that she is using this to deceive Arthur. So if we can switch this around on her, it could potentially just kind of spin her around on her head, that she just kind of doesn't expect it. And that's what I'm hoping for. Is I'm hoping to just get her off her game long enough that the power imbalance is maybe less imbalanced.
but I guess I just don't, I guess I don't see how much she, I don't have any confirmation that she needs us to not know that it's her. You know what I mean? Like, all we know is that there's an owl that's been following us, and now Yorick is telling us that's not just an owl, that's probably Lilith. And we don't know if Lilith, I okay, let's say she's not trapped, which I maybe she's not. I don't not like concrete in that theory. But I would argue that if I was a god and this dude is walking around, a completely basically normal dude who happens to have like a tumor on his back, basically in the form of a little god that is nothing to me, really. Like, why does it, like, why do I care if he, like, sure, it would probably be easier, okay, maybe, if the little guy didn't know that I was a god, but ultimately, I'm a god. What do I fucking care? Like, it wouldn't really matter to me if Arthur knew or not. So if he throws his cards, holds his cards close to his chest and pretends that he doesn't know, I'm just like, okay, dude, whatever. And then when he tries to go, aha, I did know the whole time, it's gonna be like, cute. So what? Like, and
So this is actually super interesting. Usually when you and I, talk about pull stuff, I usually am like, yeah, okay, I concede. But with this, I'm moving more deeply towards deceive, because the very fact that Arthur was very open to Alexander, he was very excited to see this owl. He was very open arms regarding this owl, versus you know that if he were to be confronted by Scratch, i.e. Lilith, once again, his reaction would be completely different. So I think, once again, Tiny Rebecca makes a good point. I'll just quote word for word. Quote, so for Lilith to continue on her path to manipulate Arthur, if that is indeed what she's doing, she will need to fully reveal herself. So any underhanded shit is now thwarted. And I'm very heavily leaning towards that as well, in terms of there is no other logical reason why she would show herself, reveal herself as an owl to me, unless it was for the express purpose of manipulating and deceiving Arthur into being a lot more open to her, because he was very excited to meet with this owl, or not meet with, but encounter this owl. So to me, it makes a lot more sense that we keep up this front. So she still thinks that she has. It might be shaken, absolutely, with her knowledge of them potentially making the hand of malevolence. But if we can somehow, at the very least, shake that confidence, I just feel there's really not that large of a loss if we were to fail in deceiving her. So I feel like this is a poker card given to us for free that I feel would be unwise to not keep in our hand right now.
I see. This is funny. The more you talk, the more I'm like, no. Now I really want to reveal. So like the the thing is, you're saying that Arthur was super receptive to this owl and he was so happy to see this owl. It's not like Arthur has been sitting there having deep conversations to Alexander. It's not like when Arthur sees the owl, he suddenly starts spouting off important shit. Like I would feel more like you had a really good point if we had seen evidence of Arthur for some reason being like attached to keeping the owl with them. He was surprised to see Alexander come back. He didn't expect it. In fact, I would say he was even a little shocked. I would also say that Arthur's happiness at seeing an owl is like kind of just sort of like, oh, thank God, something that is what it's supposed to be, something that's a normal creature in this world that I'm unfamiliar with. I wouldn't say that it's like manipulating him. And I also wouldn't say that Arthur feels, I don't think Arthur really feels a whole lot of types of ways about this owl other than, oh, it's a cute little owl. Like in the same way that I would feel if I saw an owl, which is just like, oh, cute, cool. I'm glad I saw that owl. And I don't think that it's a as big of a gotcha as like it's being painted here, where oh, Lilith is maintaining this guise to make him feel comfortable with her. I would be way more involved in that if I saw Lilith, Alexander in any way interacting with Arthur, but like she hasn't hopped up to him and like tried to be cute and playful. There's been no interaction there. She's literally just stood there.
Well, okay, and here's the thing, because Fish does point out that Arthur has spouted off important stuff in front of the owl, because he doesn't know that the owl is Lilith. And so he feels free to talk about whatever future plans they have, to go wherever they wish, versus if Lilith was not an owl, could suggest that she's not able to eavesdrop so easily on their conversations and learn some additional
Well, and
information.
that's what I said, that it would be easier for her, but it wouldn't ultimately thwart her plans. Because if Yorick is still convinced that he can't speak freely and just tell Arthur what's going on before they use the Hand of Malevolence, clearly she doesn't need to be visible in order to be able to hear us.
Well, and here's the thing, because it's not the idea that it's going to fully thwart her, but it will make it more difficult for her. And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it tougher for her to constantly be in Arthur and John's business.
I guess so. I mean, I guess if that's the point, I think the other issue is that I'm not completely convinced that the deceptive route is, I mean, we know so little about how Arthur is going to accomplish either of these things. We don't know if Arthur is going to run up to her or if he's going to call out for her, or if he's just going to wait for her to appear again, if he's like for anything to happen. We don't know if when he's deceiving, if he's going to actually like oversell it and try to pretend that he's very happy to see this owl he really shouldn't care that much about. Like, I don't know. We just don't know how either one of these are going to play out. And we also don't know Lilith's motivation. We know that she's not here to help us and she's not on Kane's side. I'm trying to think of like all of the concrete facts that I can point to, and it's really not very many. So I guess it comes down to like what you think is going to be the most helpful thing. And I just feel like revealing what he knows. I would normally be on the side of deceive because I like playing cards close to the chest and I like making sure that we have something on the table. But I feel like Arthur is just not in this position that he should be so comfortable thinking they can keep up a ruse like this from a power that is so much greater than them, kind of like Horig, right? Like he he was himself admitting, what do you do in the face of such insurmountable power? Like how are you expected to go against that? And I just feel like there are so many things that Arthur has overcome that he's starting to feel like, you know, he can just get away with lying to gods and shit. And I guess I worry about where that's going to take him. Fish says Yorick is the devil we know. Lilith is the ally we don't, because Lilith wants to go against Kane. Tiny Rebecca says Lilith doesn't want to hurt slash kill Arthur, or she would have done that already. And she doesn't want to be buddy buddy with Arthur, or she would have done that already. So she wants to be a secret third thing, and we should not encourage it either way. Fish says, I genuinely believe that Lilith is the better one to be with than Yorick if we had a choice. Tiny Rebecca responds to that with Arthur Lilith marriage pack, ultimate fuck you to Kane.
It was so funny because I was about to respond and then I forgot I was on mute. And I was like, how come no one can... Oh.
Okay, well, I think that's a fun note to go out on. Maybe Arthur and Lilith have to get married to piss Kane off in some weird wedding.
This is a new ship I would not have expected to witness. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, look, women be winning, I guess, if we're calling Arthur a win.
He is a win. Don't be so mean to him.
I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. I had a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, I did as well.
So thank you to everyone joining us live, like Fish and Edie and Graham, of course, and Benjamin Frogcrow and Tiny Rebecca, naturally. Thank you to our volunteer transcription team. Thank you to our volunteer editing team that we are newly incorporated. Thank you guys. And if you are listening to my voice in the future, thank you so much. You guys all make this show possible with me having a full-time job, which I did not have when I started this. So shit has shifted. And thanks to everyone listening in the future as well for listening, being great listeners. You can find Malevolent Autopsy on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. You can visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. That's linktr.ee/Malevolent Autopsy for all the handiest links to get everywhere. And as always, the horrors persist.
But so do we.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Bye bye.